Butter thought as she watched Marietta open her purse and pull out a flowered handkerchief. An old one from her mother, probably, still smelling of that lilac perfume Caroline had always worn, and hold it to her mouth. Even from here, you could see how pale she'd suddenly gone. Butter felt a needle prick of panic for her once close friend. They'd not had a conversation of any consequence in years, not since Marietta had called Butter would never forget the word, crass. Crass! All because Butter had complained about those emergency room doctors seeing that Mexican boy before her grandson Peter when he broke his leg skiing on their family vacation in Park City. No insurance. You could tell they weren't even American, for God's sake, and Peter having to wait on a gurney in the hallway of that little hospital for 2 whole hours while they went before him. If she thought about it now, the anger could still come before the guilt. Well, she'd been upset. Couldn't Marietta have understood that? Harry Cline was one of the last of the great gentlemen. Reese Pearson was speaking now, his eyes glued to the typed-out speech in his slightly shaking hands. Butter's eyes traveled back down to the front row. There was Marietta's brother, Macon, sitting beside her, his wife, Glinda, in a forest green suit and hat. Who wears a hat anymore? Butter asked herself. She crossed her legs, smoothing down her dress. Even though she told herself she wouldn't do it, she couldn't help but remember her own husband's funeral. It had taken place right here, 9 years earlier, come May. And she'd been sitting right there, where Marietta was now. Lord, the stress. Everybody staring, watching her, just like she was watching Marietta. Of course, that funeral hadn't been the same for Butter as this one was for Marietta, what with her and Joe practically divorced when he fell off the roof and died. Butter shook her head a little at the memory. He'd never pay the money to hire that tow-headed neighbor boy to clean his gutters like the rest of the men on the street. She told him. Well, at least it was quick. His head hit the corner of the window box on the way down, and that was that. There'd been a wren's nest in that window box. Not one of the tiny blue eggs had broken. Her son, Christo, had wanted her to have Joe's funeral at his church. They'd had a row about it. Christo and Jen went to Sanctorium, one of those modern churches that eschewed denominational labels, preferring, Butter supposed, to make things up as they went along. She and Joe had visited with them there one Easter. She'd bought a new suit for the occasion, just as she'd done every Easter of her life, and walked into the dark, windowless place, only to be met with people in jeans and T-shirts. The music sounded like the stuff she heard on the radio, and the ministers, all wearing robes, the one part of religious tradition they seemed to approve of, bobbed and bounced around the stage like car salesmen. She'd left that day, squinting in the noontime sun, feeling like she just sat through some sort of spiritual action movie. There was no way on earth she'd have launched Joe on his final journey from that place, no matter how much Christo wanted her to. Joe's 15-year-old cat, Marvel Ann, had dropped dead 2 weeks before her master. Of old age, the vet said. Privately, Butter had always thought the thing simply wanted a head start. That cat hated her. Marvel Ann would have had no intention of living with Butter in her new condo in Windward Oaks, which was where she moved after Joe died. Thank goodness they hadn't signed the divorce papers before he went. Not having to split everything down the middle meant she could afford to upgrade to a bigger unit right by the pool. All things worked together for good, Butter thought, which was, she supposed, with an inward smirk, another opinion that Marietta Cline would have called crass. That one conversation over chicken salad down at Mama's Way Cafe 5 years ago had effectively ended their friendship. Butter could never find a way to start it up again, and Lord knows Marietta had never even tried. Still, they'd known each other since childhood, and Butter wouldn't have wished a sick headache to fall on the woman right in the middle of her husband's funeral, no matter how Butter's face still burned at that memory of their last lunch together. As Reese finished his eulogy, she saw Richard Kyle get up from his seat on the second row and walk toward the pulpit. He bowed his head, and everybody else followed suit. Butter watched as Marietta dug her fingers into her neck again. You can't pray away a migraine, she thought, with a sympathy that surprised even her. A shadowless glare pierced Marietta's left eye like a drill as she sat at the end of the front row pew. Already the flowers were fading, red into mauve, yellow to beige, green.